Distinguished Service to Research Award, and that winner is Dr. Maurine Beasley of the University of Maryland. Maurine Beasley has always been there not only for her students, but for all women in journalism and communication academia. I see them sitting in front of me. I am one of them, even though I wasn't her student. Maurine Beasley has influenced a generation of researchers in a very generous and caring way. And in doing so, she has reshaped the field of communication research. And today we'll hear from some of those researchers. Tracy Gottlieb, Terry, you're not sitting in order. Tracy Gottlieb, second from it, Terry Luke, Kimberly Voss, Dana Walker, and Doug Ward. And then after they speak, we will ask Dr. Beasley to address us, and then we'll open up the floor to all of you, because I'm sure that some of you have some things you'd like to add as well.
A decade ago, I answered the phone to hear the voice of Maurine Beasley. I was just beginning my doctoral program at the University of Maryland, and she wanted to know about me. Not about what I wanted to research, not what I wanted to teach about, but just who I was. It was the beginning of a mentorship that I cherish. She is the professor and the educator I hope to be. Dr. Beasley helps guide students to their passions. I think it's because she has so much passion for her research. It becomes contagious for the students. I was a teaching assistant in her Women in the Media class at the University of Maryland several years ago. It was a tough class. All they wanted to do was plan their weddings. All they talked about before class, after class, and sometimes during class. Dr. Beasley would explain the history of discrimination against women only to be answered by, but what about Oprah? It was that kind of class. And then she taught a lecture on the media and Eleanor Roosevelt. And every one of those students actually listened. For the first time that semester after class, that's what they talked about. And I can remember that lecture to this day. She had actually reached them. I was at a conference several years ago when a Maryland doctoral student came up to me and asked if I was one of those Beasley girls. And I began to realize there are a lot of those Beasley girls out there. It's a nice group to be a part of. Dr. Beasley's guidance is dozens of women's stories told at every conference I've been at. These are people who really aren't even in the footnotes yet. And yet, because of the work that Dr. Beasley has done, we all go to those archives and we all look for those women. And I know that every time I'm at an archive and I can come along with an Eleanor Roosevelt story to share with Dr. Beasley, it's been a good trip. And that's a large part of her legacy. It's her mentorship that leads to all these women's stories being told. Dr. Beasley is also very patient. Her approach to research with graduate students reminds me of Tim Gunn on Bravo's Project Runway. For those of you that don't know, and some do, for those of you that don't know, as these designers quickly put together their dresses under this time limit, it's Tim Gunn who walks through the room, kindly and honestly says, "This is what you're doing wrong." And typically, they ignore him. They know better. I remember that. I thought I knew what I wanted to do. And yet, Dr. Beasley would quietly say, "You should really study women's pages." I ignored her because I knew better. I got the kind of rejections that Nina Garcia, Michael Kors, dole out. But yet, it really was women's pages is where I found my footing. I had listened to Dr. Beasley or Tim Gunn in the early days, I would have gotten there just a little bit faster. Thanks to her encouragement and her recommendations, I've told the stories of 15 women's page editors. These are women who literally weren't even known at their own newspapers that are now part of official journalism history. Dr. Beasley is also amazingly humble. One of my stories came from a graduate class on research I took with her. She had mentioned sending off a paper to a double-blind journal, only to get it rejected, with a note that said she should become more familiar with the work of Maurine Beasley. And in a way that only Maurine can, she said, "Well, I thought I was familiar with it." Dr. Beasley's passion, patience, and humility serve as wonderful role models for a researcher and a professor. She once noticed there's a difference between a teacher and a professor. While both hope to educate, the professor should be able to be an expert on a topic, to be able to profess that expertise. And that's truly what Dr. Beasley is as a professor, and that's why I'm so pleased to see her recognized today.